I was having coffee on a Tuesday morning when my neighbor called. Marcus, someone's building on your lot. I drove to the 8 acres I'd owned since 2009, the empty scrubland I'd bought for $80,000 when everyone thought I was crazy. Bulldozers, excavators, 20 workers in hard hats, 15 concrete foundations poured in neat rows, a sign near the entrance, Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza, coming fall 2026, 15 retail and office units, $4.2 million project, on my land. The construction foreman told me it was an HOA community development project. Karen Westfield had filed fraudulent adverse possession, claiming the land was abandoned. The county approved it. She'd secured a $3.8 million loan. She was 3 months into construction. My neighbor asked if I was going to stop them. I said no. Half-finished buildings are worthless. Completed, leased buildings are worth $6.5 million. Every dollar Karen spent from that point forward was a dollar increasing the value of my property. I let her finish all 15 buildings, let her lease 14 units, let her hold a grand opening with the mayor. Then I showed her my deed and 15 years of tax records. By the time she realized she'd built $4.2 million in commercial structures on land she never owned, it was too late to undo what came next. Before we dive in, drop where you're listening from today and remember to like and subscribe for more stories just like this. I was having coffee on a Tuesday morning in April when my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Joe Martinez. Marcus, you need to come see this. Someone's building on your lot. What lot? The 8 acres you own on Riverside and Commerce. There are construction crews, permits posted, foundation work happening. They're building something big. I set down my coffee. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I drove across town to the corner of Riverside Drive and Commerce Boulevard. The 8 acres I'd owned for 15 years. The land I'd bought in 2009 for $80,000 when everyone thought I was crazy for investing in empty scrubland on the edge of town. Joe was waiting for me at the corner, standing next to his pickup truck. Marcus, look at this. I looked. He was right. Bulldozers, excavators, construction trailers, dump trucks, at least 20 workers in hard hats and safety vests moving across the property, and 15 concrete foundations poured in neat rows, 3 rows of 5, each foundation about 30 feet by 40 feet. A large sign stood near the entrance, Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza, coming fall 2026, 15 retail and office units, a Westfield Development Group project, on my land. I stood there for a long moment watching the crews work. Framing lumber was being delivered. Electrical conduit was being laid. This wasn't preliminary work. This was serious construction. Joe looked at me nervously. Marcus, did you sell the land? Did I miss something? No, I didn't sell it. Then what the hell is going on? That's what I'm going to find out. I walked closer, staying on the public sidewalk. A construction foreman was standing near one of the trailers reviewing blueprints. I approached him. Excuse me, what's being built here? He looked up. Commercial Plaza, 15 units, mix of retail shops and office spaces. Should be done by September. Who's building it? Westfield Development Group. We're the general contractor. And who owns the land? The foreman checked his clipboard. Says here it's Riverside Commons HOA, some kind of community development project. Interesting, thanks. I walked back to Joe, who was staring at me. Marcus, they think the HOA owns your land. I heard. Aren't you going to tell them? Not yet. What do you mean, not yet? They're building on your property. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos. The sign, the foundations, the construction equipment, the workers, the blueprints visible on the foreman's table. Joe, thanks for calling me. I need to do some research. Research? Marcus, they're pouring concrete on your land. I know. I'll handle it. I drove home, opened my filing cabinet, and pulled out the folder labeled Riverside Property 2009. Inside was my deed. Warranty deed, recorded with the county clerk on August 12, 2009. 8 acres at the corner of Riverside Drive in Commerce Boulevard. Purchase price, $80,000. Everyone had thought I was insane back then. The land was zoned residential, but nobody wanted to build houses there. The soil was poor. The area was undeveloped. The nearest grocery store was 4 miles away. It was just empty scrub land that nobody wanted. But I'd seen the long-term potential. The town was growing east. New subdivisions were being built a mile away. Commercial development was pushing outward. I'd calculated that within 10 to 15 years, the area would be rezoned commercial, and that empty scrubland would become valuable. I'd been right. In 2023, the county rezoned the entire corridor from residential to commercial. Overnight, my $80,000 investment became worth $2.4 million. I'd received offers from developers, but I'd turned them down. I wasn't in a hurry. The longer I held, the more valuable it would become. I paid property taxes every year, $4,800 annually. I checked on the land every few months, though I'll admit I hadn't visited in about 6 months. I'd been traveling, managing other properties, living my life. And apparently, someone had decided to build on my land while I wasn't looking. I opened my laptop and pulled up the county permit database. Search, Riverside Drive and Commerce Boulevard. Result, building permit number 2024-8847, Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza. I clicked on the details. Project, Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza. Address, 4500 Riverside Drive, corner of Commerce Boulevard. Applicant, Karen Westfield / Westfield Development Group. Property owner, Riverside Commons HOA. Community Development Parcel. Project description, 15 commercial units, retail/office, 42,000 total square feet. Total project cost, $4,200,000. Expected completion, September 15, 2026. Permit issued, January 8, 2024. I sat back in my chair. $4.2 million, 15 commercial units. Expected completion in 5 months. Someone named Karen Westfield had filed permits claiming the land belonged to Riverside Commons HOA. The county had approved it. Construction had been underway for 3 months, and nobody had contacted me. Nobody had checked if the HOA actually owned the land. I pulled up the property tax records. My name was right there. Marcus Webb, owner since 2009. Taxes paid in full every year through 2024. So how had Karen Westfield convinced the county that the HOA owned the property? I spent the next hour digging through county records. Finally, I found it. Adverse possession claim, filed October 2022, Karen Westfield on behalf of Riverside Commons HOA. I opened the document. Claim of adverse possession. The property located at 4500 Riverside Drive, 8 acres, has been abandoned for a period exceeding 10 years. The previous owner of record, Harold Martinez, died in 2012. No heirs have been located. The property has been unused and unmaintained. Riverside Commons HOA, whose residential subdivision borders the property, claims adverse possession under Colorado Revised Statute 38-41-101. Public notice posted for required 90-day period. No objections filed. I read it twice. Harold Martinez had owned the land before me. He died in 2012, 2 years after I'd bought it from him. Karen had filed an adverse possession claim saying the land was abandoned, that Harold was the last known owner, and that no heirs existed. But that was a lie. I'd bought the land from Harold in 2009, 3 years before he died. I was the owner. I'd been paying taxes continuously for 15 years. Karen's adverse possession claim was fraudulent, but the county had approved it. There had been a 90-day public notice period in late 2022. I'd been traveling in Europe during that time, managing some commercial properties I owned in Spain. I hadn't seen the notice. Nobody had contacted me directly, and after 90 days with no objections, the county had granted Karen provisional title pending final determination. She'd used that provisional title to file building permits, and now she was 3 months into a $4.2 million construction project on my land. I picked up my phone and called Daniel Torres. Dan had been my law partner for 12 years before I'd retired from corporate law to focus on real estate investment. He was still practicing, still sharp, still the best attorney I knew. Marcus, long time. What's going on? Dan, someone is building $4.2 million worth of commercial buildings on my land. Silence. Say that again? Someone filed a fraudulent adverse possession claim on property I own, got provisional title, filed building permits. They're currently 3 months into construction of a 15-unit commercial plaza. And you're just finding out now? I haven't checked on the land in 6 months. My neighbor called me this morning. Marcus, you need to stop them immediately. File an injunction. Halt construction. This is trespass. I'm thinking about letting them finish. Another silence, longer this time. What? Dan, they've committed $4.2 million to this project. 15 commercial units. They're about 60% complete. Expected finish date is September, 5 months from now. So stop them now before they spend more money. Half-finished buildings are worthless. Completed, leased buildings are worth $6 to $7 million. If I stop them now, I get an empty lot and a lawsuit that might take 2 years. If I let them finish, I get completed buildings and massive leverage. Dan was quiet for a moment. Marcus, that's either brilliant or insane, possibly both. I know what I'm doing. They've already spent the money. Every dollar they invest from this point forward is a dollar that increases the value of my property. Why would I stop them? Because they might lease the buildings before you reveal ownership. Then you've got tenant issues, lease disputes. Tenants lease from whoever holds title. I hold title. Their leases will transfer to me. I become the landlord. This is risky, Marcus. This is strategy. I waited 15 years for this land to become valuable. I can wait 5 more months. What if they find out you own it before they finish? Then I stop them and sue for what they've built so far. But my name isn't on any of their permits. The provisional title is in the HOA's name. They think they're safe. They're not going to check again. All right, but document everything. Photos, permits, property records. When you do reveal ownership, you want an airtight case. Already started. Over the next 2 months, I visited the construction site once a week. I never identified myself. I'd park across the street, walk along the public sidewalk, take photos from public property. I documented every stage of construction. Week 1, framing going up on all 15 buildings. Week 2, roof trusses installed, exterior walls being erected. Week 4, roofing completed, windows and doors being installed. Week 6, utility connections, interior framing, HVAC systems. Week 8, drywall, flooring, painting. The project was moving fast. Westfield Development was clearly experienced and well-funded. In late June, a new sign went up. Retail and office space available. Leasing now. Contact Westfield Properties. They were leasing my buildings. I called the number on the sign. Westfield Properties, this is Amanda. Hi, I'm interested in leasing office space in the new Riverside Commons Plaza. Wonderful. Let me connect you with Karen Westfield, our leasing director. A minute later, a woman's voice came on the line. Professional, confident. This is Karen Westfield. Thanks for your interest in Riverside Commons. Are you looking for retail or office space? Office. Around 2,000 square feet if you have it. We do. We have several units in that range. The plaza is opening in September. Would you like to schedule a tour? Yes, I'd like to see the property. Perfect. How about Thursday at 2 p.m.? I'll be there. Thursday afternoon, I drove to the construction site. The buildings were about 70% complete now. Exteriors were finished, modern design, glass facades, professional landscaping being installed. Karen Westfield was waiting near the main entrance. Late 40s, blonde hair, expensive business suit, confident handshake. You must be Marcus. I'm Karen. Welcome to Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza. I shook her hand. Impressive project. Thank you. We're very excited about it. This location is perfect. High visibility, easy access, growing commercial corridor. We've already leased 12 of the 15 units. She walked me through the site, showing me the layout. Retail spaces on the ground floor, office spaces on the second floor of the larger buildings. Professional finishes, ample parking, monument signage planned for the entrance. So tell me about the development, I said. Who owns it? It's a community development project through Riverside Commons HOA. I'm the HOA president, and my company, Westfield Development, is managing the construction and leasing. Interesting model. An HOA developing commercial property? Karen smiled. The land was unused community property adjacent to our residential subdivision. We saw an opportunity to develop it in a way that benefits the community. Lease revenues will fund HOA improvements, reduce homeowner fees, maintain common areas. Everyone wins. Smart. Who owned the land originally? Karen's smile flickered for just a second. It was abandoned property. The previous owner died years ago. No heirs were located. We went through the proper legal channels to claim it for community use. Adverse possession? Yes, exactly. The county approved our claim after the required notice period. Everything was done legally and properly. I nodded, said nothing. Karen showed me 3 available office units. All were nice, high ceilings, large windows, modern finishes. Lease rates were competitive, $28 per square foot annually. When can tenants move in? September 15th. We're on schedule. If you're interested, I can have a lease agreement prepared. Let me think about it. I'll be in touch. Of course. Here's my card. I took the card and left. That evening, I pulled up the county adverse possession filing again and read through the entire claim. Karen had filed in October 2022. She'd claimed the land had been abandoned since Harold Martinez's death in 2012. She'd stated that no heirs existed and no one had maintained the property for over 10 years. All lies. I'd been the owner since 2009. I'd paid taxes every year. The land hadn't been abandoned. I'd simply chosen not to develop it yet. But Karen had gambled that no one would object during the 90-day public notice period. She'd gambled that the real owner, me, wouldn't find out in time. She'd been right. I'd been traveling in Europe during those 90 days. I'd never seen the notice. And now she'd spent $4.2 million building on land she didn't actually own. I pulled up a spreadsheet and did the math. Construction cost, $4.2 million. Current completion, 70%. Current value of partially completed buildings, approximately $3 million. Projected value when 100% complete, $6.5 to $7 million. Projected annual rental income, based on Karen's leasing rates, $890,000. If I stopped construction now, I'd own $3 million in half-finished buildings. I'd have to spend another $1.2 million to complete them myself, and I'd be tied up in litigation for years while Karen sued to recover her construction costs. But if I waited until September, I'd own $6.5 million in completed, leased buildings. Karen would have no recourse. You can't recover construction costs for buildings you built on someone else's land. And I'd have immediate rental income of $890,000 per year. The strategic play was obvious. Wait. Every dollar Karen spent from this point forward was a dollar that increased my equity. Every lease she signed was a lease that would transfer to me as the rightful property owner. She was building my investment. For free. I called Daniel Torres. Dan, construction is 70% complete. 12 of 15 units are leased. Karen's committed another $1 million in the past 2 months. And you still haven't told her you own the land? Why would I? She's doing exactly what I'd want a developer to do. Building high-quality commercial space, securing tenants, creating immediate cash flow. Except I don't have to pay for any of it. Marcus, when are you going to reveal ownership? September 16th, the day after her grand opening. You're going to let her have a grand opening for buildings she doesn't own? I'm going to let her finish the project, lease all the units, celebrate her success, and commit completely. Then I'm going to show her my deed and explain that she built $4.2 million worth of buildings on my land. Dan laughed. You're a patient man, Marcus. Patience is how you make money in real estate. Over the next 10 weeks, I watched the project march toward completion. July, interior finishes installed, landscaping completed, parking lot paved. August, final inspections, certificate of occupancy issued. Grand opening announced for September 10th. Signs went up. Grand opening, Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza, September 10th, tour available units. Karen sent out press releases. The local business journal ran an article. New commercial plaza promises economic growth for Riverside corridor. I drove by the site in early September. The buildings looked fantastic. Professional signage, beautiful landscaping, fully leased except for 2 remaining units. Karen had done an excellent job. The plaza was exactly the kind of development I would have built if I'd hired a developer to do it. Except I hadn't hired anyone. She just built it. On my land. With her money. September 10th arrived. The grand opening. I didn't attend. I watched from across the street as the mayor cut a ribbon. Local business owners toured the facilities. Karen gave speeches about community development and economic growth. The plaza was 100% complete. 14 of 15 units leased. Ready for occupancy on September 15th. I sat in my car holding my original deed from 2009. 15 years ago, I'd paid $80,000 for empty scrubland that nobody wanted. Today, that land held $6.5 million in completed commercial buildings. And tomorrow, I was going to tell Karen Westfield that every single building belonged to me. The grand opening was scheduled for September 10th, but Karen held a preview event for HOA members and prospective tenants on August 20th. I received an invitation in my mailbox, not at my home, at my office address, which was publicly listed for my consulting business. You're invited. Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza Preview Event. Join us for a first look at our new community development. Light refreshments. Leasing information. August 20th, 5 to 7 p.m. I marked it on my calendar. The construction was nearly complete. According to my weekly surveillance visits, the buildings were at least 85% finished. Exterior work was done. Interior finishes were being installed. Landscaping was complete. The parking lot was paved and striped. It looked professional, high quality, exactly the kind of commercial development you'd expect from an experienced developer. Karen Westfield knew what she was doing. Unfortunately for her, she was doing it on my land. August 20th arrived. I drove to the plaza at 5:15 p.m. The parking lot was filling up, 60 or 70 people milling around. A white tent had been set up with refreshment tables. Karen stood near the main entrance, greeting arrivals like a proud homeowner showing off a new house. I parked and walked over, keeping a low profile. I wore casual clothes, jeans, a polo shirt, sunglasses, just another curious attendee. Karen was giving a speech near the tent. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to preview Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza. This project represents 18 months of hard work, planning, and community investment. We're incredibly proud of what we've accomplished. She clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on a large screen behind her. 15 commercial units, 42,000 square feet of retail and office space, prime location at the corner of Riverside and Commerce, and I'm thrilled to announce that we now have 14 of 15 units leased. Applause from the crowd. Karen clicked to the next slide, showing photos of the completed buildings. Our tenants include a coffee shop, a dental office, a law firm, a yoga studio, an accounting firm, a physical therapy clinic, and several other professional offices. These businesses will bring jobs, services, and economic activity to our community. Another slide. Projected annual rental income, $890,000. More applause. This revenue will directly benefit Riverside Commons HOA members. We project that lease income will allow us to reduce annual HOA fees by 40%, while funding significant improvements to common areas, parks, and amenities. A man in the front row raised his hand. Karen, that's incredible. How did the HOA manage to fund a $4 million construction project? Karen smiled. We secured a commercial development loan based on the property's value and projected rental income. The loan will be paid off by rental revenues over the next 12 years. After that, it's pure profit for the community. I felt my jaw tighten. She'd taken out a loan against property she didn't own. Another woman asked, "What about property taxes on the commercial buildings?" The HOA will pay property taxes from rental income. We budgeted for that. Even after loan payments and taxes, we'll have over $300,000 annually to reduce member fees and fund improvements. A younger man near the back raised his hand. Who actually owns the buildings? The HOA collectively, or is there a separate entity? Karen didn't hesitate. The HOA owns the property. It's community-owned. All Riverside Commons homeowners are stakeholders. The more successful this plaza becomes, the more everyone benefits. I watched her lie with complete confidence. She believed it. She'd convinced herself that the adverse possession claim made her the rightful owner. After the presentation, Karen led tours through the buildings. I joined one of the groups. We walked through Unit 3, a 2,400 square foot office space leased to a law firm. The interior was finished, polished concrete floors, modern lighting, glass-walled conference rooms. This tenant signed a 5-year lease, Karen explained. They're paying $32 per square foot, which is competitive for this market. They move in September 15th. She walked us through Unit 7, the coffee shop. Espresso machines were being installed. Seating areas were set up. A chalkboard menu hung on the wall. This is exactly the kind of business we wanted to attract, Karen said. A gathering place for the community. Somewhere residents can walk to from the subdivision. One of the tour participants, a woman in her 50s, asked, Karen, this must have been a huge risk. What if tenants don't renew their leases? Karen smiled. We've been careful about tenant selection. All of our tenants are established businesses with strong financials. We required personal guarantees on leases over $50,000 annually, and the location is excellent. High visibility, growing area, strong demographics. We're confident this will be a long-term success. The tour continued through 3 more units. Each was impressive. Professional finishes, quality construction, functional layouts. Karen had built something valuable on someone else's land. After the tour, I grabbed a bottle of water from the refreshment table and stood near the edge of the crowd, observing. Karen was surrounded by HOA members congratulating her, shaking hands, taking photos. She was basking in the success. A man I recognized, Donald Westfield, Karen's husband, stood near the entrance talking to contractors. He was in his mid-50s, stocky, wearing a Westfield Development polo shirt. He looked pleased with himself. I overheard part of his conversation. Yeah, we brought it in under budget. Original estimate was $4.5 million. Final cost was $4.2 million. Solid margin on this one. So Donald ran the construction side. Karen handled leasing and community relations. It was a family operation using HOA cover for legitimacy. I pulled out my phone and took photos. The buildings, the crowd, Karen's presentation slide showing the financials, Donald talking to contractors. Then I quietly left. That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing everything. I pulled up the county property records one more time. My deed was still valid, still on file, still showing me as the owner since 2009. I checked the tax records. I'd paid property taxes in full for 2024, $5,200 for the 8-acre parcel. The county had accepted my payment. No flags, no issues, no indication that anyone else claimed ownership. Then I pulled up the commercial loan Karen had mentioned. Public records showed that Riverside Commons HOA had taken out a $3.8 million commercial development loan from Mountain West Bank in February 2024. The loan was secured by Riverside Commons HOA Community Development Parcel, 4,500 Riverside Drive. Except the HOA didn't own that parcel. I did, which meant the loan was secured by property the borrower didn't actually own. I called Daniel Torres. Dan, they've done it. Construction is 90% complete. 14 of 15 units leased. Karen just held a preview event celebrating the project's success, and she's taken out a $3.8 million loan secured by my property. Jesus, Marcus, that's fraudulent loan collateral. I know, and she's told the entire HOA that lease revenues will reduce their fees by 40%. She's promised them $300,000 annually in savings. So when you reveal ownership, not only does Karen lose the buildings, the HOA loses their promised savings, and they're stuck with a $3.8 million loan they can't repay. Exactly. When are you revealing? September 16th, the day after tenant move-in. Why wait until after move-in? Because once tenants are moved in, they've invested in the space. They paid deposits, signed leases, installed equipment. The disruption of having to relocate will be enormous. It creates maximum pressure on Karen to settle rather than litigate. You're cold-blooded, Marcus. I'm strategic. Karen built these buildings knowing, or at least strongly suspecting, that her adverse possession claim was shaky. She gambled that the real owner wouldn't surface. She lost that gamble. Now she pays. What's your ask going to be? Fair market value for the completed buildings. My land was worth $2.4 million when she started building. The completed buildings are worth $6.5 million. She's created $4.1 million in value on my property. I want compensation for that value. She's going to say she's entitled to compensation for her construction costs. Under Colorado law, if you build on someone else's land without permission, the improvements become property of the landowner. She has no claim to the buildings. She built them. I own them. That's how it works. What if she can't pay? Then the bank forecloses on the loan. I buy the buildings at auction for pennies on the dollar, and Karen goes bankrupt. Either way, I end up owning completed, income-producing buildings that I didn't pay to construct. Dan was quiet for a moment. You waited 15 years for this. I waited 15 years for the land to become valuable. Karen just accelerated my return by building on it. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched the final preparations. Tenants began moving in. The coffee shop received its final health inspection and posted an opening date, September 18th. The dental office installed equipment. The law firm moved in furniture and set up their reception area. By September 15th, all 14 tenants were operational or preparing to open. Karen sent out another press release. Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza fully operational. Grand opening celebration, September 21st. The local news ran a story. HOA developed plaza brings economic growth to Riverside Corridor. The article included quotes from Karen about innovative community development and resident-focused investment. I saved a copy of the article. September 16th arrived. I called Daniel Torres. It's time. Draft the lawsuit. What are we filing? Trespass, quiet title action, unjust enrichment, fraud regarding the adverse possession claim. I want an immediate restraining order preventing Karen from collecting rent, signing new leases, or taking any action regarding the property. And I want a court hearing within 30 days. This is going to destroy her, Marcus. She built $4.2 million worth of buildings on land she knew she didn't own. She defrauded a bank by using my property as loan collateral. She promised HOA members financial benefits based on property she had no right to develop. This isn't about destruction. This is about consequences. All right, I'll have the filing ready by tomorrow. Good, and Dan, make sure we include my deed, 15 years of tax payment records, and proof that Karen's adverse possession claim was based on false information. I want this airtight. It will be. That evening, I drove past the commercial plaza one last time before filing suit. The buildings looked beautiful under the evening lights. The coffee shop was open, customers inside. The parking lot was half full. Professional monument signs displayed tenant names. Karen had done an excellent job. The plaza was exactly what the area needed. Well-designed, professionally managed, economically viable. She'd just made one catastrophic mistake. She'd built it on my land. Tomorrow I'd remind her who the real owner was, and everything she'd built would become mine. The grand opening ceremony was scheduled for September 21st at 11 a.m. I received a formal invitation, not as a potential tenant this time, but as a community stakeholder. Karen's team had sent invitations to every business owner in the Riverside corridor, every city council member, and apparently everyone on their mailing list. Join us for the grand opening of Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza, ribbon-cutting ceremony with Mayor Jennifer Walsh, tours, refreshments, celebrating community-driven development. September 21st, 11 a.m. I didn't RSVP, but I watched. September 21st arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, 70 degrees, light breeze. The plaza looked immaculate. Banners hung from lampposts. A red ribbon stretched across the main entrance. White tents with refreshment tables. A small stage with a podium and microphone. I parked across the street at 10:45 a.m. and watched through binoculars from my car. The crowd arrived. At least 150 people, city council members, business owners, residents from Riverside Commons HOA, local press with cameras. Mayor Jennifer Walsh arrived at 10:55 a.m. Karen greeted her with a handshake and walked her through the plaza, pointing out features, introducing tenants. At 11 a.m. sharp, Karen took the podium. Thank you all for being here today. This is a proud moment for Riverside Commons HOA and for our entire community. 18 months ago, we saw an opportunity, unused land adjacent to our residential neighborhood that could be transformed into something valuable for everyone. She gestured to the buildings behind her. Today, we're celebrating the completion of Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza. 15 commercial units, 42,000 square feet of retail and office space, 14 tenants already operational, bringing jobs, services, and economic growth to this corridor. Applause from the crowd. This project represents a new model of community development. Instead of waiting for outside developers, our HOA took initiative. We secured financing, managed construction, and created something that directly benefits our residents. Lease revenues from this plaza will reduce HOA fees by 40% while funding parks, amenities, and community improvements. More applause. Karen introduced Mayor Walsh, who gave a brief speech about innovative community partnerships and grassroots economic development. Then came the ribbon cutting. Karen and the mayor posed with oversized scissors. Cameras flashed. The red ribbon fell away. The crowd cheered. I sat in my car watching, holding a manila envelope. Inside the envelope were 3 documents. My warranty deed from 2009 showing continuous ownership, 15 years of property tax payment records, the lawsuit I was filing in 48 hours. Karen didn't know it yet, but her celebration was about to become her worst nightmare. I let the ceremony continue. Tours, refreshments, Karen giving interviews to local reporters about community-driven development and sustainable growth models. By 1 p.m., the crowd had dispersed. Karen stood near the entrance with Donald, her husband, both of them looking satisfied. I started my car and drove home. September 23rd, 2 days after the grand opening. Daniel Torres filed the lawsuit in county court at 9 a.m. Marcus Webb versus Karen Westfield, Donald Westfield Development Group, and Riverside Commons HOA claims. Trespass in unlawful construction on private property. Quiet title action, confirming Marcus Webb as rightful owner. Unjust enrichment. Buildings constructed on Marcus's land without compensation. Fraud. Karen's adverse possession claim based on false statements. Fraudulent loan collateral. Using Marcus's property to secure HOA loan. Relief sought. Immediate restraining order preventing defendants from collecting rent, signing leases, or taking any action regarding the property. Transfer of all lease agreements to Marcus Webb as rightful property owner. Compensatory damages. Fair market value of completed buildings, $6.5 million. Punitive damages for fraud, attorney fees, and court costs. Daniel also filed an emergency motion for temporary restraining order, scheduled for hearing the next day. At 10 a.m., a process server delivered copies of the lawsuit to Karen at her home, to Donald at the construction office, and to the HOA board president. I waited. My phone rang at 10:47 a.m. Unknown number. This is Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb, this is Karen Westfield. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the shock underneath. I just received a lawsuit claiming you own the property where Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza is located. That's correct. That's impossible. We went through adverse possession. The county granted us title. The county granted you provisional title based on a fraudulent claim. You stated the land was abandoned and the previous owner was deceased with no heirs. Both statements were false. Harold Martinez died in 2012, and I bought the land from Harold Martinez in 2009, 3 years before he died. I've been the continuous owner for 15 years. I've paid property taxes every single year. The land was never abandoned. Silence. Mr. Webb, there must be some mistake. We did our due diligence. We filed proper notice. You filed notice in late 2022. I was overseas at the time and didn't see it. That doesn't make your claim legitimate. You built $4.2 million worth of buildings on my land without my permission. We had provisional title. Provisional title based on fraud. You claimed the land was abandoned. It wasn't. You claimed no owner existed. I existed. You either knew that and lied, or you failed to do basic research. Either way, you built on my property. Karen's voice rose. We have 14 tenants, signed leases, a grand opening 2 days ago. You can't just... I can, and I am. The restraining order hearing is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring your attorney, and Karen, bring proof of your adverse possession claim. You're going to need it. I hung up. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was a man's voice, angry. Mr. Webb, this is Donald Westfield. What the hell do you think you're doing? Protecting my property rights. You don't own that land. We have title. You have fraudulent title based on a false adverse possession claim. I have a deed from 2009 and 15 years of tax payments. Who do you think a judge is going to believe? We spent $4.2 million building that plaza. On my land, without permission. That was your mistake, not mine. We're not tearing down those buildings. Then you'll compensate me for them. Fair market value, $6.5 million. Donald laughed, bitter and harsh. We don't have $6.5 million. We took out a loan to build. We need rental income to pay it back. That's not my problem. You gambled on a fraudulent land claim. You lost. We'll fight this. You're not taking our buildings. They're not your buildings. They're on my land. That makes them my buildings. I hung up again. The next day, September 24th, I arrived at the courthouse at 1:45 p.m. Daniel met me outside. They've hired Richard Morrison, big firm out of Denver, specializes in real estate disputes. Good. That means they're taking this seriously. Marcus, they're going to argue that you waited too long, that by allowing construction to complete, you waived your right to object. Colorado law doesn't support that. Property rights aren't waived by inaction. If someone builds on your land without permission, you can object at any time. They'll also argue good faith, that they believe the adverse possession claim was legitimate. We'll show them the tax records. I paid taxes every year. If they'd done even basic due diligence, they would have found my name on the tax rolls. At 2 p.m., we entered the courtroom. Judge Thomas Brennan presided. He was in his early 60s, former real estate attorney before becoming a judge, known for no-nonsense rulings. Karen and Donald sat at the defendant's table with their attorney, Richard Morrison. Karen looked pale. Donald looked angry. Judge Brennan reviewed the filings. Mr. Webb, you claim the defendants built commercial structures on land you own? Daniel stood. That's correct, Your Honor. Mr. Webb has owned the property continuously since 2009. He has a recorded deed and 15 years of property tax payments. The defendants filed a fraudulent adverse possession claim and built without his knowledge or permission. Richard Morrison stood. Your Honor, my clients acted in good faith based on a county-approved adverse possession claim. They followed all legal procedures. Based on false information, Daniel interrupted. The adverse possession claim stated the land was abandoned and the previous owner deceased with no heirs. That was false. Mr. Webb owned the land and paid taxes continuously. Judge Brennan looked at Karen. Mrs. Westfield, did you research who was paying property taxes before filing your adverse possession claim? Karen hesitated. We researched the deed records. Did you check who was paying taxes? No, Your Honor. Why not? We relied on the deeds showing Harold Martinez as the last owner of record. But you didn't check if anyone else had acquired the property after Mr. Martinez? We assumed if someone else owned it, they would have objected during the notice period. Judge Brennan turned to me. Mr. Webb, why didn't you object during the notice period? I stood. I was overseas managing properties in Europe, Your Honor. I didn't see the notice. But that doesn't invalidate my ownership. I've paid taxes every year. The land was never abandoned. The judge reviewed the tax records Daniel had submitted. 15 years of payments, all in my name, all current. Mrs. Westfield, these tax records show continuous ownership by Mr. Webb. A simple tax roll search would have revealed this. Why didn't you conduct that search? Karen didn't answer immediately. Richard Morrison whispered to her. Finally, she spoke. Your Honor, we believe the land was abandoned. We were trying to put unused property to productive use for community benefit. By building $4 million in structures on land you didn't actually own, we believe we owned it after the adverse possession claim was approved. Judge Brennan looked at the file again. The adverse possession claim was granted provisional title pending final determination. It wasn't a final transfer of ownership. You were supposed to confirm ownership before beginning construction. Richard Morrison stood. Your Honor, my clients invested $4.2 million in good faith. Good faith requires due diligence. A tax roll search takes 5 minutes. Your clients failed to perform basic research. That's not good faith. That's negligence. The judge reviewed Daniel's motion for restraining order. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. Effective immediately, defendants are prohibited from collecting rent, signing new leases, or taking any action regarding the property at 4500 Riverside Drive. All keys, access codes, and property management authority are to be turned over to Mr. Webb within 48 hours. Karen's face went white. Your Honor, we have 14 tenants who will now deal with Mr. Webb as the property owner. This restraining order remains in effect until the quiet title action is resolved. Trial is set for November 15th. Judge Brennan banged his gavel. It was done. The buildings were mine. The trial was set for November 15th, but the restraining order hearing had already determined the outcome. I was now the legal property manager of Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza. Karen and Donald had 48 hours to turn over all keys, access codes, lease agreements, and property management authority. They didn't comply willingly. September 26, the deadline, arrived with no contact from Karen or Donald. At 4 p.m., Daniel filed a motion for contempt of court. At 4:47 p.m., my phone rang. Richard Morrison, their attorney. Mr. Webb, my clients need more time to transition property management. Your clients had 48 hours. The deadline has passed. They're coordinating with tenants, organizing documents. They're stalling. Tell them they have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to comply, or I'm asking the judge to hold them in contempt and impose daily fines of $5,000. That's unreasonable. What's unreasonable is building on someone else's land and then refusing to return it when caught. 9 a.m. tomorrow, Richard. All keys, all documents, all access. I hung up. At 8:30 a.m. on September 27th, Karen and Donald arrived at Daniel's office with 2 boxes of documents, a ring of keys, and a laptop containing property management software passwords. Karen looked exhausted. Donald looked furious. Daniel reviewed the contents, lease agreements for all 14 tenants, maintenance contracts, utility accounts, property insurance documents, bank account information for rent collection. This appears complete, Daniel said. Mr. Webb is now the property manager and landlord of record for Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza. Karen's voice was quiet. What happens to the HOA loan? We owe Mountain West Bank $3.8 million. That's between you and the bank, I said. The loan was secured by property you didn't own. That's your problem, not mine. The HOA members thought they were going to get 40% fee reductions. They're going to lose everything. They should have asked questions before their president committed them to a fraudulent development scheme. Donald stood up. You're stealing our buildings. I looked at him calmly. I'm reclaiming my property. You built on my land without permission. Under Colorado law, improvements made to another person's property become that person's property. You don't get to keep buildings you constructed on land you don't own. We'll sue for compensation. You can try, but Colorado case law is clear. If you build on someone else's land without permission, you have no claim to the improvements. You gambled that I wouldn't find out or wouldn't care. You lost. Karen and Donald left without another word. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza, my plaza now, and met with each of the 14 tenants. Most were confused and concerned. Their landlord had just changed overnight. They wanted assurance their leases were still valid. Your leases are valid, I told each of them. I'm the new property owner. Everything in your lease remains the same. Rent amount, terms, responsibilities. The only difference is you'll be paying rent to me instead of Westfield Development. The coffee shop owner, Maria Chen, asked the question they all wanted to ask. What happened? Why did the landlord change? The previous owners built this plaza on land they didn't actually own. I'm the rightful owner. They built on my property without permission. A judge confirmed my ownership, and now I'm the landlord. So we're safe? We won't be evicted? You're safe. I want good tenants. You sign leases in good faith. You're not responsible for the previous owner's mistakes. Most of them were relieved. A few were skeptical but willing to wait and see. One tenant, the law firm in Unit 3, had a managing partner named James Donnelly who asked more pointed questions. Mr. Webb, if you own this land, why did you let them build before stopping them? I discovered the construction 3 months in. At that point, I had a choice: stop them immediately and end up with half-finished buildings worth nothing, or wait until they completed construction and own finished buildings worth millions. I chose to wait. James looked at me with a mix of respect and concern. That's brilliant and ruthless. That's business. They trespassed on my property. I chose when to enforce my rights. That's legal and strategic. Are you planning to raise our rents? Not unless market conditions change significantly. Your lease rate is fair. I'm a commercial real estate investor. I understand that good tenants paying fair rents are better than vacant buildings. You'll have no problems with me as long as you pay rent and maintain your space. James seemed satisfied. All right, we'll see how this goes. Over the next 2 weeks, all 14 tenants adjusted to the new ownership. Rent payments came in. I deposited them in a new property management account I'd opened. First month's rent collection, $68,500. Annualized, $822,000. After property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, I was looking at roughly $650,000 in net annual income from a property I'd paid $80,000 for 15 years ago, and I hadn't spent a single dollar on construction. The trial date, November 15th, approached. Karen and Donald tried multiple legal strategies to avoid the inevitable. Their attorney filed a motion arguing I'd waived my right to object by allowing construction to complete. Daniel filed a response citing Colorado case law. Property rights are not waived by inaction. A property owner may object to trespass at any time, regardless of when the trespass is discovered or when the owner chooses to act. Judge Brennan denied their motion. Karen filed a counterclaim seeking $4.2 million in unjust enrichment for the construction costs. Daniel filed a response citing the doctrine of improvements by trespasser. Under Colorado law, a person who builds on another's land without permission has no claim for compensation for improvements made. The improvements become property of the landowner. Judge Brennan scheduled a hearing on the counterclaim. November 8th, 1 week before trial. Both sides appeared before Judge Brennan for the counterclaim hearing. Richard Morrison argued passionately, "Your Honor, my client spent $4.2 million in good faith building these structures. Mr. Webb is now reaping the benefits of their investment without compensation. That's the definition of unjust enrichment." Daniel stood. "Your Honor, Colorado Revised Statute 3841-203 is clear. A person who makes improvements to real property owned by another without the owner's consent acquires no right to the improvements and is not entitled to compensation. This is settled law. But, Your Honor," Richard continued, "my clients acted in good faith based on county-approved adverse possession." "Good faith requires due diligence," Judge Brennan interrupted. "Your clients failed to check tax records. A simple search would have revealed Mr. Webb's continuous ownership. That's not good faith. That's negligence. Your Honor, the result is wildly unjust. Mr. Webb gets $6.5 million in buildings without paying for them, because your clients built on his land without permission. If I build a house on your property without asking, I don't get to keep the house or demand you pay me for it. That's basic property law." Richard tried a different angle. "Your Honor, at minimum, my clients should be compensated for the increase in land value. The land was worth $2.4 million before construction. It's now worth $6.5 million with the buildings. The $4.1 million increase was created by my client's investment." Judge Brennan shook his head. "The increase in value is irrelevant. Your clients had no right to build. Mr. Webb has no obligation to pay for improvements he didn't authorize. So Mr. Webb gets a windfall. Mr. Webb gets his property back with improvements built by trespassers." "That's not a windfall. That's the legal consequence of building on someone else's land. Judge Brennan looked at the file. The counterclaim for unjust enrichment is dismissed. Trial will proceed November 15th on the remaining quiet title issue. Karen stood up, her voice breaking. Your Honor, this will bankrupt us. We took out a $3.8 million loan to build. We can't repay it without the rental income. We'll lose everything. Judge Brennan looked at her with something close to sympathy, but his voice remained firm. Mrs. Westfield, you filed an adverse possession claim without verifying ownership. You built $4 million in structures on land you didn't confirm you owned. You took out a loan secured by property you didn't actually control. Those were your decisions. The consequences are yours to bear. But the HOA members, they thought they'd get fee reductions. They invested in this. The HOA members trusted you to make sound decisions. You didn't. That's between you and them. The hearing ended. Karen and Donald left the courtroom, looking defeated. November 15th, trial day. The courtroom was packed. HOA members filled the gallery, some supporting Karen, others angry at her. Local media was present. The story had become regional news. Developer loses $4 million plaza after building on wrong land. Judge Brennan called the trial to order. This is a quiet title action. Mr. Webb seeks confirmation that he is the rightful owner of the property at 4500 Riverside Drive. The defendants claim ownership through adverse possession. Let's proceed. Daniel presented our case. It took 20 minutes. Original deed from 2009. 15 years of tax payment records. Every year, every payment, all in my name. Proof that Harold Martinez had sold me the land before his death, making Karen's adverse possession claim false from the beginning. Richard Morrison presented Karen's case. It took 15 minutes. Adverse possession claim filed in 2022. County approval after 90-day notice period. Good faith reliance on county determination. $4.2 million invested based on that approval. Judge Brennan asked Karen directly, Mrs. Westfield, did you check property tax records before filing your adverse possession claim? No, Your Honor. Why not? I relied on the deed records showing Harold Martinez as owner. But you didn't verify whether Mr. Martinez had sold the property before his death? No. Did you attempt to contact any heirs or estate administrators? We couldn't locate any. Did you hire a title company to do a thorough search? Karen hesitated. No, we did our own research. And your research consisted of looking at old deed records without checking tax rolls, without hiring professionals, without making any real effort to confirm ownership. We believed the land was abandoned. Based on what evidence? It was empty, undeveloped. No one was using it. Empty land doesn't mean abandoned land. Mr. Webb paid taxes every year. The county sent him tax bills. He paid them. That's not abandoned property. Richard Morrison stood. Your Honor, my client made an honest mistake, an expensive mistake, a mistake that could have been avoided with basic due diligence. Judge Brennan reviewed his notes. Here's my ruling. The property at 4500 Riverside Drive is owned by Marcus Webb. He has held continuous, uninterrupted ownership since 2009. The adverse possession claim filed by Mrs. Westfield was based on false information and is hereby invalidated. All structures built on the property belong to Mr. Webb as the rightful landowner. The defendants have no claim to the improvements or to compensation for construction costs. He banged his gavel. The quiet title action is granted in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Webb is confirmed as the sole owner of the property and all improvements thereon. Karen put her face in her hands. Donald stared at the table. It was over. The buildings were legally, unquestionably, officially mine. 3 days after the trial, I made Karen an offer. Daniel sent it in writing to Richard Morrison. Settlement proposal. Mr. Webb is willing to sell the property at 4500 Riverside Drive, including all structures and improvements, to Mrs. Westfield for $8 million. This represents the fair market value of the completed commercial plaza. Payment terms: $2 million down, balance financed over 15 years at 6% interest. Offer expires in 14 days. It was a generous offer. Karen could keep the buildings she'd constructed. She'd pay double what she'd spent, but she'd own a cash-flowing asset worth $6.5 million in completed construction, plus $2.4 million in land value. If she could find the financing, she could salvage the situation. Richard Morrison called Daniel 2 days later. "My client can't accept the offer. She doesn't have $2 million for a down payment, and no bank will finance her after this lawsuit. She's already in default on the construction loan. Then she needs to demolish the buildings and return the land to its original condition," Daniel said. "That would cost at least $800,000. She doesn't have that either." That's not Mr. Webb's problem. She built on his land without permission. She either buys the property or removes the structures. Those are her only options. There has to be a middle ground. There isn't. Your client gambled and lost. Mr. Webb is being more than fair by offering to sell at market value. If she can't pay, she needs to remove her structures. The call ended. Karen didn't respond to the settlement offer. The 14-day deadline passed with no contact. So I sent her a certified letter on December 5th. "Dear Mrs. Westfield, you failed to respond to my settlement offer. Therefore, you are hereby notified that you have 60 days to remove all structures you built on my property at 4500 Riverside Drive and return the land to its original condition. If you fail to remove the structures within 60 days, I will seek a court order authorizing me to demolish them at your expense, with costs added to the judgment against you. Sincerely, Marcus Webb." Karen received the letter on December 7th. 2 days later, she did something desperate. She called an emergency meeting of the Riverside Commons HOA. Joe Martinez, my neighbor who'd first alerted me to the construction, attended the meeting and called me afterward. "Marcus, you need to hear what happened. Karen tried to rally the HOA members to fight you." "Fight me how?" "She told everyone that you're stealing community property, that the plaza was built for the benefit of HOA members, that you're an outsider trying to take away their promised fee reductions." How did people react? At first, some people were on her side. They're angry about losing the fee reductions. But then Tom Brennan, he's an accountant, lives 3 streets over, he started asking questions. What kind of questions? He asked who actually owned Westfield Development Group. Karen said it was a community development company. Tom said he'd looked it up. It's a private LLC owned by Karen and her husband Donald. Not the HOA, not community-owned. Private. I smiled. And? People lost it. They started asking why Karen used the HOA's name for permits and loans if it was her private company. Why she told everyone the HOA would get rental income if her company was collecting the rent. Karen tried to explain that the HOA was supposed to be a partner, but people weren't buying it. What happened? Tom Brennan moved to remove Karen as HOA president. It passed unanimously. Then someone moved to hire an attorney to investigate whether Karen defrauded the HOA. That passed too. Who's the new president? Sarah Mitchell. She's a retired CPA. First thing she did was announce that the HOA is hiring a forensic accountant to review everything Karen did. Karen was losing her support base. A week later, the HOA filed its own lawsuit. Riverside Commons HOA versus Karen Westfield and Donald Westfield. The complaint alleged fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and misappropriation of HOA resources. The key allegations: Karen had used the HOA's name and reputation to obtain permits and financing for a private development project. Karen had told HOA members that rental income would reduce their fees. But Westfield Development LLC, not the HOA, was listed as the entity collecting rent. Karen had personally guaranteed the construction loan, but used the HOA's name on permits, creating the appearance of HOA liability. Karen had failed to disclose her personal financial interest in the development. The HOA sought damages, return of any fees Karen had collected in her role as president, and removal of Karen from any HOA position. Karen and Donald tried to fight on two fronts, my lawsuit and the HOA's lawsuit, but they were running out of money and options. Mountain West Bank, the lender who'd provided the $3.8 million construction loan, began foreclosure proceedings on December 20th. The loan had been secured by Riverside Commons HOA Community Development Parcel. But that parcel didn't exist. The land was mine. The bank's collateral was invalid. The bank's attorney called Daniel. "Mr. Torres, my client has a problem. We issued a construction loan secured by property at 4500 Riverside Drive. We now understand that property belongs to your client, not to the borrower." "That's correct. The borrower defaulted on the loan. We're foreclosing, but we can't foreclose on property the borrower doesn't own." "Correct again. We've reviewed the situation. The borrower committed loan fraud by using property they didn't own as collateral. We're pursuing criminal charges, but we'd like to discuss purchasing the property from your client to recover some of our losses." I met with the bank's representatives on January 8th. They offered $5.5 million for the property, enough to recover most of their loan plus legal costs. I countered with $7 million. The property generates $822,000 annually in rent. At a 6% cap rate, it's worth $13.7 million. I'm offering you a significant discount. But we'd be inheriting 14 tenants with existing lease rates. We can't raise rents until leases expire. Those tenants are stable, paying on time, and have multi-year leases. That's a feature, not a bug. $7 million is my price. They countered with $6.2 million. I agreed to $6.5 million. On January 22nd, I closed the sale to Mountain West Bank for $6.5 million. My total investment, $80,000 in 2009, plus $72,000 in property taxes over 15 years, plus $35,000 in legal fees. Total, $187,000. Sale price, $6.5 million. Net profit, $6,313,000. Return on investment, 3,375%. I turned $80,000 into $6.5 million by waiting 15 years and letting someone else build on my land. Karen and Donald's situation continued to deteriorate. With the property sold, they had no assets to offset the $3.8 million loan they owed. Mountain West Bank sued them personally for the loan deficiency. The HOA's lawsuit moved forward. Discovery revealed that Karen had personally collected $140,000 in development fees from Westfield Development, fees she'd never disclosed to HOA members. On February 15th, Westfield Development LLC filed for bankruptcy. Karen and Donald filed for personal bankruptcy 3 weeks later. Their assets were liquidated. Their home went into foreclosure. Their cars were repossessed. By March, they'd moved out of state, somewhere in Texas, I heard, to start over with nothing. The HOA settled their lawsuit for a judgment Karen would never be able to pay. But the new HOA board made it clear Karen was permanently banned from any HOA in Colorado. Her name was on a registry of fraudulent board members maintained by the state HOA Commission. The tenants at Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza, now owned by Mountain West Bank, continued operating without interruption. The bank hired a professional property management company. Rent collection continued. The plaza remained successful. I received a few angry calls from former HOA members who blamed me for the loss of their promised fee reductions. One woman, Linda Patterson, called me in late March. "Mr. Webb, because of you, our HOA fees went up instead of down. Karen promised us savings. You took that away." Karen promised you savings using properties she stole from me. You were never entitled to those savings. They were based on theft. But we didn't know. Then you should have asked questions. Karen told you the HOA owned the land. Did anyone verify that? Did anyone check county records? Did anyone ask why Westfield Development, a private company, was managing a supposedly community-owned project? Silence. You trusted Karen without doing due diligence. That was your mistake. I protected my property rights. That was my right. Linda hung up. I didn't feel bad. Karen had tried to steal my land, build on it, profit from it, and rally people against me when she got caught. She'd failed, and I'd turned an $80,000 investment into $6.5 million. Patience pays. 1 year after Joe Martinez called to tell me someone was building on my land, I received an email from a commercial real estate magazine. Mr. Webb, we're writing a feature article on strategic real estate investing. Your case, where you allowed construction to complete on your property before asserting ownership, has become something of a legend in investment circles. Would you be willing to be interviewed? I declined. I wasn't interested in publicity, but the story had spread anyway. The man who let someone build his investment, they called me in investor forums, the most patient real estate play in Colorado history. I didn't care about the reputation. I cared about the return. $6.5 million from an $80,000 investment. 3,375% return over 15 years. And I'd spent $0 on construction. Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza was thriving under Mountain West Bank's ownership. All 15 units were now leased. The bank had filled the last remaining space with a Pilates studio in March. Annual rental income exceeded $900,000. The bank had offered to sell me the property back for $7.2 million in June. I'd considered it, but decided I'd rather deploy that capital elsewhere. I'd already made my profit. Let someone else manage the tenants and maintenance. Karen Westfield and Donald Westfield were gone. Their bankruptcy had finalized in May. They'd lost everything: their home, their cars, their business, their reputation. The construction loan deficiency judgment followed them. $2.1 million they'd never be able to pay. I'd heard through Joe Martinez that they'd divorced in August. Karen had moved to Houston to live with her sister. Donald had moved to somewhere in rural Texas, working construction for someone else's company. The Riverside Commons HOA had recovered, barely. The new board, led by Sarah Mitchell, had implemented strict oversight procedures. No board member could vote on any contract where they had financial interest. All major expenditures required forensic review by an independent accountant. Board meetings were recorded and transcribed. Sarah had sent me a formal letter in July. Mr. Webb, on behalf of the Riverside Commons HOA, I want to apologize for the actions of our former president. Karen Westfield abused her position, misled our members, and violated your property rights. The new board is committed to transparency and accountability. We hope to be good neighbors going forward. I'd appreciated the gesture. The tenants at the plaza had all adjusted to the change in ownership. Most didn't care who owned the buildings, as long as their leases were honored and maintenance was handled promptly. Maria Chen, the coffee shop owner, had told me during one of my last visits, "Honestly, Mountain West Bank is a better landlord than Westfield was. They respond faster to maintenance requests, and they're not constantly trying to nickel and dime us on fees." That had made me smile. In September, almost exactly 1 year after I'd filed suit, I drove past the plaza one afternoon. The buildings looked pristine: professional landscaping, full parking lot, busy tenants. A banner hung near the entrance: "Now leasing, 1 unit available." It was everything Karen had envisioned: a successful commercial development in a growing corridor. She just built it on the wrong land. I parked across the street, the same spot where I'd watched the construction a year ago, and thought about the entire sequence of events. 2009. I'd bought empty scrubland for $80,000 because I recognized long-term potential. 2023. The area was rezoned commercial. Land value jumped to $2.4 million. 2024. Karen built $4.2 million in structures on my land. 2025. I revealed ownership, kept the buildings, sold for $6.5 million. 15 years of patience, one strategic decision to wait, and a return most investors would never see in their lifetimes. My phone rang. Daniel Torres. Marcus, I just got off the phone with a prospective client. Guy bought land 10 years ago, just discovered someone's building apartments on it. He wants to know if he should stop them or let them finish. I told him to call you. I laughed. Tell him it depends on how complete the construction is and whether he can afford to wait. He asked if you'd consult on his case. Did you tell him my consulting fee? I told him you'd want 20% of his eventual settlement or sale. That's about right, Daniel laughed. You've created a whole new investment strategy. Wait for trespassers to build, then claim the improvements. It's brilliant and terrifying. It only works if you have the patience to wait and the discipline not to panic. Most people would have stopped construction the moment they found out. They would have gotten nothing but a lawsuit and an empty lot. And you got $6.5 million. I got what I earned by waiting 15 years for the land to become valuable and 5 more months for someone else to develop it. A week later, I was invited to speak at a commercial real estate investment conference in Denver. I'd initially declined, but the organizer offered a $25,000 speaking fee, so I reconsidered. The conference was in mid-October. 300 investors, developers, and real estate attorneys in a hotel ballroom. I gave a 45-minute presentation titled Strategic Patience, Long-Term Land Investment. I walked through the entire case, buying the land in 2009, recognizing rezoning potential, holding through market cycles, discovering the construction, making the decision to wait, and ultimately selling for 34 times my original investment. During Q&A, a young investor in his 30s raised his hand. Mr. Webb, weren't you worried they'd finish construction, lease the buildings, and then you'd have a mess trying to evict tenants? No. Tenants lease from whoever holds title. I held title. Their leases would have transferred to me automatically. The tenants weren't trespassers. Karen was. Another investor asked, what if they discovered you owned the land before finishing construction? Then I would have stopped them at whatever stage they were at and sued for damages. If they'd been 50% complete, I would have owned half-finished buildings worth maybe $2 million. Still a good return on $80,000. But by waiting until 100% completion, I own $6.5 million in finished buildings. Better return. A woman in the back asked the question I'd been expecting. Was what you did legal? It feels like you let them spend millions just to take it away. Completely legal. Property law is clear. If you build on someone else's land without permission, the improvements belong to the landowner. I didn't trick Karen. I didn't mislead her. She filed a fraudulent adverse possession claim and built without verifying ownership. Her mistake, not mine. But ethically, I protected my property rights. Karen tried to steal my land through adverse possession fraud. She spent $4.2 million gambling that I wouldn't find out or wouldn't care. She lost that gamble. I don't owe her compensation for improvements she made to my property without permission. The room was silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. Others joined. By the time I left the stage, half the room was applauding. Strategic patience wasn't just legal, it was admired. A month later, in November, I received a letter from a new tenant at Riverside Commons Commercial Plaza. The letter was from James Donnelly, the managing partner of the law firm in Unit 3, the one who'd asked if I was going to raise rents. Mr. Webb, I wanted to reach out now that we've been in the space for over a year. You were right, you've been an excellent landlord in absentia. Mountain West Bank has managed the property well, rents haven't increased unreasonably, and the plaza is thriving. I wanted to thank you for handling the ownership transition professionally. Many landlords would have tried to renegotiate leases or force tenants out. You honored our agreements. That means something. I appreciated the letter. It confirmed what I'd believed from the beginning. Good tenants and stable leases are valuable. Disrupting them would have been counterproductive. In December, I ran into Joe Martinez at a coffee shop in town. "Marcus, I haven't seen you in months. How's retirement treating you?" "Can't complain. Still investing, still managing properties. Just closed on a land deal in northern Colorado." "Another 15-year hold?" I smiled. "Maybe. We'll see what happens." Joe shook his head. "That Riverside property, people still talk about it. Karen Westfield's name is mud around here. But you're a legend." "I'm just an investor who recognized an opportunity." "You waited 15 years for land to become valuable, then waited 5 more months for someone else to build on it. That's not just opportunity, that's strategy. It's patience. Most people can't wait 15 years for a return. They want results now. I was willing to wait. Well, it paid off. It had. On New Year's Eve, I sat in my home office reviewing my investment portfolio for the year. The Riverside property sale had been the highlight. $6.5 million gross, $6,313,000 net after costs. I'd reinvested $4 million of that into 3 new land parcels in developing areas around Colorado. Long-term holds, 10 to 20 years before I'd see returns. But I'd learned long ago that real wealth isn't built quickly. It's built through patience, strategic positioning, and the discipline to wait while everyone else panics or rushes. Karen Westfield had been in a hurry. She'd seen an opportunity, or what she thought was an opportunity, and moved fast. Filed adverse possession, got provisional title, started construction, committed millions. And she'd lost everything because she didn't verify the one thing that mattered: who actually owned the land. I'd spent 15 years waiting for the right moment, and when someone else built my investment for me, I waited 5 more months to maximize the value. Patience had turned $80,000 into $6.5 million, and it would do it again. That's the secret most investors never learn. The best investment strategy isn't finding the right property, it's having the patience to wait for the right moment. And sometimes the right moment is when someone else does the work for you.